Tae-hyung stood frozen in place, the tops of his feet now tingling with the ghost of Jungkook's. Tae-hyung would be lying if he said that he hadn't hoped that he would have the privilege of feeling Jungkook's lips on his again, but this wasn't anything like what he had imagined. He'd pictured the two of them falling into each other's arms, blubbering love yous and sorries that were barely intelligible over their choked crying. Tae-hyung would squeeze Jungkook tightly, Jungkook would do the same, and Tae-hyung knew that it would only be a matter of time before he felt Jungkook's lips, maybe on his forehead, the place that the taller boy's mouth naturally fell to when they were standing together, or perhaps on Tae-hyung's cheeks, with Jungkook melting away his tears and letting sweet little pecks blossom in their path, or, if Tae-hyung was lucky, Jungkook's lips would find his own, molding their mouths together in a that would cause Tae-hyung's heart to sing and his stomach to flutter, surely just one of the many that were to come to make up for lost time. But this, two fleeting pecks just below the base of his toes. An action that Tae-hyung had felt dozens of times before, a touch that he hadn't even missed. Tae-hyung had completely forgotten about this ritual, though in hindsight, he should have been expecting it. It was something Jungkook had begun doing on his own not too long after he started subbing for Tae-hyung, just a quick double head of their play to signify that he was ready to work or serve or otherwise submit however Tae-hyung wanted him to. Tae-hyung had grown to the simple action that felt like Jungkook was passing his submission through into Tae-hyung, giving his most precious gift on a velvet pillow. Now though, it had completely caught Tae-hyung off guard. Not only had Tae-hyung not been anticipating this move, but panic was beginning to flood his chest as he realized that his first from Jungkook had come and gone, and it had been nothing like how Tae-hyung had fantasized. What if he never felt Jungkook's lips again? 13, 14, Tae-hyung snapped out of it moments later, realizing that Jungkook was still counting. Tae-hyung quickly hurried past Jungkook and shuffled to the stairs, taking the steps two at a time. He threw open the door to his room and began scanning the bed. How was he even able to sleep with so much random junk surrounding him? He grabbed the rubbish bin and began swiping things into it, pausing every few moments to chuck a piece of laundry across the room but not looking to see if it made it into the basket. A mostly empty beer bottle was soon in his hand, being pressed to his lips as he instinctively downed the rest of it. He made a face at the taste, realizing that it must have been on his end table longer than he had thought. He placed the rest of the bottles in the bin, cursing himself for leaving so many half full. Once the rubbish and laundry were cleared, Tae-hyung set down the bin and stared at the bed. When was the last time he had changed the sheets? It had to have been weeks ago. He hadn't been able to find the energy to do much of anything around the house lately, and many chores often got pushed to the end of his to-do list day after day. Tae-hyung tried to tell himself that his depression was the only reason he hadn't changed the bed, and not because the more he washed his blankets, the less they smelled like Jungkook. He found himself on too many nights with his face buried in his pillow that Jungkook would often steal, inhaling deeply in an attempt to find hidden traces of the boy's scent. Tae-hyung had found it difficult to achieve during the last time he had done this, but he'd convinced himself that it was due to his sinuses being clogged from crying and not because Jungkook's smell had all but completely faded in the time since he had left. Tae-hyung had refused to believe this. Tae-hyung began pulling the covers from the bed and scrunching them into a large ball in his arms. Surely he didn't have time to completely strip the bed, but maybe he could at least remove the top blankets and replace them with fresh ones before Jungkook came upstairs. Daddy! Tae-hyung startled at the voice that came from the doorway. He was never going to get used to Jungkook calling him that again. Taehyung whipped his head towards the sound with a gasp. Cookie, he breathed, stomach dropping to his toes. Taehyung's eyes were immediately drawn to it, a dark wet patch causing him to instinctively lick his lips as his eyes began trailing over the rest of Jungkook's body, playing connect voice to toes. Seeing them had Taehyung feeling like in his chest, slowly letting out air like a sigh of relief. Taehyung made Taehyung feel like he was home, like he was complete after having been just a bunch of unconnected pieces for so long. Taehyung had been avoiding the mirror every time he'd passed by it, unable to look at himself and the black stains on his skin, knowing that there was a boy across town with complimenting ink that Taehyung might never be able to touch again. But now it was right there in front of him, every last little doodle that Taehyung could trace from memory if he had to. "Is he okay, Sir?" Jungkook asked, shifting in place and pulling his fingers with the opposite hand. Taehyung blinked, his mouth feeling dry. Words. He needed to make words. How long had he been staring? "Come here," was all he said, dropping the blankets back to the bed and holding out an arm. Jungkook slowly came forward, hands dropped in front of his crotch as he gnawed at his lip. "Stop with the biting," Taehyung spoke lowly, reaching out and taking Jungkook's chin in his hand. Taehyung extended his thumb upwards and pressed it into Jungkook's skin, dragging downward and pulling the boy's lip. "Sorry, sir," Jungkook mumbled, gaze falling to the floor. Taehyung soothed, his thumb automatically beginning to smooth over the hairs below Jungkook's lips. The gesture was so gentle that Taehyung almost pulled away. He knew that he shouldn't be Jungkook like that. Hell, he shouldn't be Taekook at all. "Here," Taehyung murmured, letting go and walking to the table beside his bed. He returned to Jungkook with a small hand, eyes widened. "Didn't realize I left that here." "You kept it?" "Of course I did," Taehyung spoke. Taehyung was very aware of Jungkook's eyes on him, dancing across the man's face as he focused on painting Jungkook's lips. "You keep it in your bedside table drawer?" the boy asked softly a few seconds later. Taehyung swallowed hard. Taehyung had found a bottle of ibuprofen on one of the nights when his crying had given him an awful headache. His first instinct, upon seeing the forgotten piece of Jungkook, had been to cry even harder. But moments later, he'd found himself clutching it hard, desperate to hold on to one of the last bits of evidence that Jungkook had once lived there, that Taehyung home had once been Jungkook's home, that there had been a time where Taehyung had been able to kiss pink lips when he was sad instead of kissing the mouths of beer bottles. He'd brought it to bed with him and accidentally fell asleep with it in his hand. At some point in the night he had woken up and put it in his drawer. He had almost forgotten it was there. Until now, when he was looking for a way to get Jungkook to stop biting his lip. "Why didn't you tell me it was?" Taehyung smudged his thumb over Jungkook's lips mid-sentence, creating a smear that hadn't been there before. "I can't do this if you're going to keep talking," he muttered, reaching for a tissue from the box next to the bed. "Sorry, sir," Jungkook mumbled, puckering slightly as Taehyung fixed his mistake, suddenly not wanting to have it in his hands anymore. There, he had done a less than perfect job, but he supposed it didn't even matter. It wasn't like Jungkook ever stayed in place in the bedroom anyway. "Do I look pretty?" Jungkook asked, his cheek and rolling his ankles inwards. Taehyung took in a shaky breath through his nose, his tongue suddenly feeling like it was coated with glue. The question had completely taken him by surprise. Jungkook had never asked him this. Then again, Taehyung realized, Jungkook never had to. Taehyung had always been there to tell him how gorgeous he looked. A sweet compliment spilling from Taehyung's lips the moment that he pulled the stick away from Jungkook's. Jungkook was so pretty that it physically made it hard for Taehyung to breathe, as if the boy's pouty red lips was the air cleaner. And somehow, this time, Jungkook's lips seemed even more luscious than Taehyung ever remembered. Had they always been like this, plump and sweet and sultry? They looked as though they would taste like candy if Taehyung were to lean in and draw one of them into his mouth, swiping his tongue over, the same way he had done hundreds of times before. He wanted to kiss Jungkook so badly, press their lips together in a passionate snarl that would have both of their faces messy with crimson, crude splotches mixed with sheens of spit that probably would make Taehyung look like a clown. On Jungkook though, it always looked so beautiful, no matter where on the boy's face his makeup ended up during their lovemaking. He always looked so pretty.